Welcome to another episode Beyond Perception. I'm Simon, and it's my great joy to welcome Paul Reisler today here as my guest. Paul, I'm sharing a brief bio of yours. Ever since you started making up songs at the age of 5, you have led the musical life. You're a composer, a songwriter, recording artist, performer, and teacher. You're also the founder and artistic director of Pan Alley, which we will talk about today, co-founder of Trapezoid, as well as your current bands, Paul Reisler and 1,000 Questions, and 3 Good Reasons. And over the past 45 years, you have performed in over 3,000 concerts, recorded close to 36 albums, co-written Aesop's Fables for Orchestra and Narrator, as well as the script and songs for 2 musicals, the Talented Clementine and Bouncin. And it is my great joy to speak today with you. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Simon. Nice to talk with you.
And we just talked briefly before we started recording about how I got curious about you. And I heard Robert Fritz, who is a teacher of the creative process and also was a guest in the past on this podcast before. And he talked about you and your creative work, and that intrigued me to look into what you're doing and also to reach out to you. And here we are. So, as I just shared in the introduction, you have this incredibly long background as a creator and musician, and creativity and creative expression seems very important to you. And I would love to ask you directly, what does creativity mean to you, and what role does it play in your life?
Well, I think it dominates my life, for better or worse. I think it's really important to approach life in a creative way, not just to, try and fit into the box and do things in a kind of rote way. So creativity is really, in a way, it's a continuous learning process, because you don't know the answer, and the creative act is to, take, as Robert would say, your current reality, which is, I don't have this song and I want to have a song about this, and then work from there. And along the way, you're learning always, because you don't know the answer. You're figuring it out as you go. And each decision you make along the way changes your course somewhat also. And it might make you take a left turn. It might make you, go in a somewhat different direction, but you're always learning. And I think that that's a real key to life, is to always be learning. I think when you stop learning, you lose interest. It's the discovery that keeps us interested. And really, interest is what makes everything happen anyway. You decide you're interested in something and you explore it. And so that's what I do really in the creative process.
And I also just shared already in the bio that you started making up songs at the age of 5. Did someone teach you to make songs?
Oh, no. I've mostly learned. A lot of this is self-taught. I think every little kid makes up songs, and that was back in the days of, as you can tell, I'm somewhat old, and that was in the days of, Pat Boone and Elvis Presley and those kinds of people. And so, I'd hear them on the radio, and then I'd make up a song kind of imitating. And I think most kids make up songs at one point or another. I just happen to be someone who, I didn't go straight through, and I've been writing songs there nonstop since the age of 5. But I have been writing songs nonstop for probably the last 40 years. Anyway, so I had periods where I've always been in music. My first career was as a musical instrument maker, and I thought that was what I was going to be. And did that from about the time I was 16 until my mid-20s, when I formed a band with another instrument maker, friend of mine, Sam Rosetta, and our 2 apprentices. And we got a record contract at our very first performance in 1975. We made a record, and all of a sudden we were a national touring act, and my instrument making, while it continued for a while longer, my interest in it changed. Because I think one of the things with making instruments and doing, that really fine, detailed work is your focus is very focused and in. And as a performer, your focus is bringing everybody in. And so it's the difference between this and that. And after a while, I found it was difficult to switch back and forth between those two. And what I loved was the community that music made and the being able to touch people on a different level with music. And so I just decided, I gradually stopped making instruments. My tools are all out in the shed and very rusty, and I don't even fix my own guitars anymore, just because I have, as we were talking about interest, I have no interest. And my interest is in the music these days.
And that's very interesting what you're saying. Your focus is bringing everybody in. But when you're creating a new song, I would imagine that your focus is probably still within, or what would you say? Where's creativity emerging? Where does it come from?
Interesting comment, and very true. When I'm performing, I think of the song exists between the performer and the audience.
Huh.
It's not like I'm up there in my big hat and playing and the song's about me. And it's not all about the audience. It's the reaction of the audience. The song exists in the center, and they're looking at it in their way because I've invited them in to look at the song. And I'm looking at what the meaning is for me. The meaning is not necessarily the same for the listener and for the creator. And in fact, because a song is a very short form, you can only give a few telling details to bring people in, and then they have to finish the picture from their own experience, from their own dreams, from their own thoughts. So that, because the song's short, it's a short form. If I was writing a novel or a 3-hour play, it's a very different thing because you can fill in much more of the detail. But the song exists in the middle, so it's still that kind of, even when you're writing it, but it's there and you step outside of it. And in fact, that's the difference, I think, between art therapy and art. So in art therapy, you go into it and you roll around in it, and it's, you're really focused on this thing in your life that happened to you. And as an artist, you look at it and you step back from it and you say, oh, yeah, well, that happened, but how do I create meaning out of that? How do I make that not just be an event, but have meaning? And for that, we step back from it and we look at it. And we do a little, and we might paint it a little bit and then go, well, let's see, I need a little more yellow over here and a little more green over here. Or I need more tension in my song here. And so I'm going to use a, diminished seventh chord here. And here I need it to calm down, and maybe I'll go, with something a little more calming. That kind of thing. It's that ability to keep stepping back and then diving in again. And it is a back and forth. It is. You really focus on something, you step.
So what I'm making up in my own head when I'm listening to you now is that the difference between art therapy and an artist is that the artist has the ability or needs to develop the skill set of not taking one's creation too personal in one sense, but it's still personal, apparently.
Well, it's got elements of being personal because you're writing, from experience, from knowledge, or from imagination. And it's really from imagination. We take a little thing that happened in our life and we imagine different ways of approaching it. We may have an idea for a song, and I could do it this way, I could do it this way, I could focus on this. What I try and avoid is, I think there was an awful lot of singer-songwriter things that fit in the realm of music therapy more than they fit in the realm of creative artistic expression. And it's being too tied to the facts, the physical facts versus the emotional truth of things. And so you see that, and I see that some when I'm teaching, adult songwriters. As my dad used to say, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So, I try and make the story better or more interesting by being willing to change the police report facts to something that's more. What does this mean emotionally? What's the learning? What's the transformation that happens with it? And so that's how I kind of look at the difference between those two things. And as an artist, you are, as you say, going back and forth, going in, stepping back, taking a look at it, going back in, focusing on a detail, coming back out of it.
And what you said also before, that basically every child is singing at a young age or making up songs, but then also not every child is becoming a songwriter or continuing having music in its life. So nor should they. People ask me, they say, well, I've worked with close to 80,000 children now writing songs. Incredible, yeah.
And that's a lot of kids, and people want to have this metric like, well, how many of them are out there as professional singer-songwriters? And there are some, there's one who works for us, who started off, 20 some years ago with us. And there's another girl who, a great singer-songwriter, and she's been opening for Paul Simon. And there are a bunch of others out there, but that's not the point. The point is to inspire people to discover how to live life creatively. Because you can be a creative farmer, you can be a creative lawyer, you can be a creative car mechanic. It's that looking at things and seeing where you are right now and where you want to go and how do you get there. And the creative part is that movement between the two things and the discovery along the way. So I want people to, it's interesting. They say we live in a creative economy. And I've noticed after, these 2,800 songs that there's an inverse relationship between the quality of the songs and the age of the kids. As they get past 4th or 5th grade, the songs get worse. So on one hand, they say, we live in a creative economy. Fantastic. We live in a creative economy. On the other hand, what's happening in education that makes people less creative as they get older rather than more creative? Because that's really what's happening. Well, there's a couple of things. One is they've heard too much bad radio now, as they've gotten older, and they've heard songs that aren't that great, and they try and imitate those. But a really huge one is self-consciousness, and the continual editing of initial response, of the initial creative response that comes to you. And there are a variety of other factors in that. If a child, like in Kid Pan, I was working with kindergartners, and one boy said, the wind blew me a pony. What a beautiful image, the wind blew me a pony. And his teacher piped up, now, Johnny, the wind can't blow you a pony. A pony's too heavy for the wind. Well, that's why the songs get worse. For that very reason. So what we're trying to do is have the kids have an experience of the creative process. And the creative process is really starting with the blank sheet of paper or the blank canvas, and then creating something out of that nothing, out of that little idea that comes into your head. And so if they can experience the creative process in a very successful kind of way, they may decide, to approach their life in a creative kind of way instead of in a rote sort of fashion. And that's really what our mission is. It's not to create a bunch more songwriters. I can't recommend these days I cannot recommend to people that they decide to become a full-time professional songwriter.
Mm.
When I came up, it was possible. It's pretty difficult right now. And so I think that I want people to explore their life and use the creative process in whatever they're doing. And that's really what success is for us, rather than, having an army of Grammy-winning songwriters out there.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing what you
Oh, I
just
was
said.
thinking, I was just on one more
Yeah,
aside
sure.
there. So thinking about what we were talking about. Uh, uh, so there's a song on our Kid Pan Alley Charlottesville album. The name of the album is called I Used to Know the Names of All the Stars. And that particular song came about. We're working with first graders down south of Charlottesville, Virginia. And they were studying the planets. And they wanted to write a song about the planets. I said, well, who knows the names of all the planets? And this boy's hand shot up immediately. And I said, okay, what are they? He says, oh, I used to know the names of all the stars. I mean planets. And I go, whoa, you used to know the names of all the stars. When did you know the names of all the stars? Oh, back before I was born. And then we started talking about how, we're born knowing it all, and the angel slaps us on the mouth when we're born, and excuse me, we have to go through life to learn it all again. So it goes, I used to know the names of all the stars. Now I just know a few planets like Jupiter, Earth, and Mars. I used to know the name of every child, back before I was born, back when I was safe and warm, back when I was flying in the sky. Now I have to go to school and learn it all again, get good grades, and try and remember when. I used to know the names of all the stars. And then the last verse, which is really interesting, is I used to know the leaf of every tree. Now it's just a forest in the dusk of evening. I used to see the God in everything. Now it's just a rustle and a whisper that I'm trusting when the red bud blossoms in the spring. Now that was first graders. In a way, that's what Kid Pan Alley's about. We know this stuff. We have it in us. We just have to find the way to get it out there, so it can inspire other people.
And what you're basically saying, each one of us is creative. That's
Yes.
part of our nature, but not everybody keeps maybe that creativity within one's awareness, or what you also said, that what we start doing or what we are educated in is start filtering or censoring our maybe creative impulse.
Well, in a way, we all are creative, and we're born creative, but we don't necessarily have the tools to express that creativity. And one of the things we try and do is give them the tools to express that. I know so many songwriters who, have to wait for a bolt of lightning before they can write a song. And, it's like, oh, I need inspiration in order to write. And I'm kind of the opposite. Well, first of all, I have to go in there and I'm writing these songs with kids in 2 1-hour sessions. And I can't just go in there and say, well, sorry, third graders, I'm just not feeling it today. You're out of luck. Sorry about that. I'm going to play a little video and, enjoy it. No, I have to go in there and I have to be able to turn it on like I'm flipping a light switch. And that takes skill and it takes practice to be able to flip it on, because the creative process is a way of looking at the world. And, some people like Robert, he's creative in most every moment there is. But for most of us, we go back and forth from the rote things we have to do, like balance our checkbook, which we don't have checkbooks anymore. We do it online, but from those kinds of things, which require a not necessarily creative approach, to writing a song, creating a movie, doing a painting. And so what I'm after is, how do you move freely between those worlds? Because the creative world is not necessarily the same world that we exist in.
And just maybe for those of our listeners who don't know Kid Pan Alley and don't have really context what it is about, would you mind introducing it and sharing a bit about what?
Should have done that earlier. So
yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Kid Pan Alley is a program I started back in 1999 by accident. I was asked. I live in a very small rural community. The whole county is only about 6,500 people, and the largest town is 124 people. So it's really rural. And I was asked to be part of this interdisciplinary residency at our local elementary school for 3 weeks. And I wasn't interested in teaching the kids songs about, Old MacDonald had a farm or whatever. But I was very interested in the creative process. So I thought, I wonder what it would be like to write songs with kids, because I'd been teaching songwriting to adults for many years at that point and been writing songs for so long. And I thought, well, let's see how it works. And I went in the first day and we wrote 5 songs the first day. And it just went from there. In 3 weeks, we'd written 60 songs. We had a performance with, since it was interdisciplinary, there was a choreographer involved and a visual artist. And so the kids made sets, they choreographed, they danced, we did the songs. And everybody came afterwards, said, oh, I really would like a copy of that song and that song. And I was... I've had a long career since 1975 as a performing artist, recording artist. And I had, while I had produced some children's albums for an artist named John McCutcheon, who's a very well-known folk singer in the United States, all over the world, actually. I'd produced some kids' albums for him. Otherwise, I hadn't been that involved in kids' music. And so that first day we wrote all those songs, and the next day it was the same thing. And some of them were awful, some of them were good, some of them needed some work. But at the end of 3 weeks, I had 60 songs, and people kept asking, how are we going to get these? And I got this idea to get all the musicians in our community together and have each one of them record a song in their own style. And I raised a little money from friends here, and we made an album called Tidal Wave of Song. It came out the week before 9/11 and was promptly buried under the rubble. But one of the things that happened is my dear friend Beth Nielsen Chapman, who's a great songwriter, she wrote This Kiss among many, many other great songs, introduced me to the conductor of the Nashville Chamber Orchestra. Because I'd also, at that point, I'd written that I was finishing up that Aesop's Fables for Orchestra and Narrator, thinking that he'd be interested in doing that. Well, when I showed him the Kid Pan Alley album, he was glommed onto that. And, within 15 minutes, we were planning on doing this big project in Nashville. And we wrote songs in every school in Nashville. And because it was Nashville, it would be ridiculous of me to be the only songwriter, because there were all these amazing songwriters. So I got a bunch of songwriters together and we went into different schools. We wrote about 60 songs and we made an album with the orchestra. So some of them had orchestras, some of them were more, band oriented, kind of all over the map. But we had Amy Grant and Delbert McClinton and Kix Brooks and Raul Malo of the Mavericks and all these incredible singers. And one of the songs got a Grammy nomination that we did with the orchestra. With songs we wrote with third graders, and it kind of just grew from there. And then when people started hearing that. But the interesting thing about it is, you see, I think so often people think that kids are just capable of this, just that much. And, a kid will do a drawing and their parents will hang it on the refrigerator. Oh, that's really good, Johnny. But, that's really good, Johnny, for a 8-year-old. Let's hang it on the refrigerator. And the pack we have been taking is, that's a really great song. let's treat it at the highest professional level. Get, someone you hear on the radio all the time to sing it and do a really great arrangement of it so that that song sounds every bit as good as anything you hear anywhere. And so that's what we've tried to do, is to really honor the work of the children at the highest professional level. So as I mentioned earlier, we've written about 2,800 songs with about 80,000 children, and we've made 6 albums of the songs and numerous other recordings and in all kinds of situations. And, we've had artists who are not as much known. We had Sissy Spacek sing one of the songs, and, that the actress, and we just did a piece where we arranged it for string quartet, and we got Pinka Zuckerman, who's one of the most famous violinists in the world, to perform it. And so it's really also been such a creative experience, and figuring how to get from the blank page to these finished songs that kids are going to be so proud of.
Could you take us through the process of from the blank page and then coming up with a song, I think within 1 hour? That's what you said, right?
Well, it's 2 1-hour sessions.
2 1-hour sessions.
Separate days. So,
so
basically,
how does that work? Yeah.
Here's the, as the whole thing is about creative process,
And it's a group experience, right? It's a group of children together.
Right?
Yeah.
So usually we're working with a classroom full of kids. 20 to 25 kids is the usual class size these days. So usually we go in, I'll play them a song, just get everybody loosened up, which has a sing along and also some hand movements for them to get physicalized in their body, just to get them warmed up. And then I'll say, well, what are we going to write about? Let's get about 15 ideas up here, and then we'll vote on it. So they come up with ideas, and after we have enough up there, we vote on it, and whatever gets the most votes, we do. There are a couple of things we don't write about, mostly because I know nothing about them. Like, I haven't had a television since 1967, and so I can't really help them if we're writing about something that's on TV. Yeah. And I've never played video games and a few things like that. And they may say, if they say something like aliens on the moon, do we have 3 or 4 minutes worth of stuff to say about that? Or is it just a funny line that, we're going to have one line and then we're going to be sitting there scratching our head? But for the most part, they get that. And so we decide what we're going to write about. Then we brainstorm on it, usually doing, process that you might call clustering, or where they're just with the next thing that comes into their head, they call it out and we put it up there in a very random sort of way. Because the creative process is not a linear process. I think Robert's really helped me make it somewhat more linear, but it still is, you have something over here and something over here and something over here, and you take this and you bounce it up against it. And if it creates a spark, then you start exploring it. And so we're going in a kind of random next thing that comes to your mind. Let's put it up there. Let's put it up there.
But it's like what I'm hearing, it's coming up with a story around the team.
Yes, it's coming up with the story, but we're not sitting there thinking about what the story is yet.
Yeah.
We're thinking about what comes into our mind, and our mind has this incredible ability. If you just kind of hold this picture of something in your head, but don't think, think it through in a logical manner. Just whatever it is you're seeing, whatever you're hearing, trying to go from sensory imagery, sensory language, not as opposed to conceptual language, like, not trust. Trust is a concept. So what, tell me something where it made you trust someone else or something like that. And I'm always asking them questions. I'm leading them through it. I ask them, I start seeing some direction, and I'll start focusing in on some questions for them, leading it. once I see a general direction happening from it, I talk to them about the importance of a first line of a song, because it's really the hook. It's what brings people in. It's not necessarily what we call the hook in music, but
Hmm.
it is what the carnival barker does. Come on in and see, see the bearded lady or whatever it is they say to get you in there. And so you got to grab them pretty early on. So we talk
Hmm.
about a first line, and then we try and come up with a first line. And it may exist up there in the brainstorming. Part of it may exist up there in the brainstorming, or some kid may come up with something. Uh, and we'll get 3 or 4 first lines, vote on them. Whatever gets the most votes is what the first line is. And then we just go through, we'll write a whole section of lyric, a verse or a chorus, usually, uh, but just lyrically. And what the reason for that is I want them to say exactly what they mean. So if you start with music, you're going to be, 8 bars of four beats in a measure, eight measure, whatever, because that's just kind of the typical thing. And you're going to change the chords here, here, and here, and here's the melody. And okay, now let's find words that we can jam into this box. And I
Hmm.
don't want them to start with the box. I want them to start with what they saying exactly what they mean. So we write a section of lyric first, and then we come up with music for that lyric. And the way in which we do that is I'll have someone speak the first line and we clap it. I'll have someone speak the first line so we can get the natural rhythm of how we say it. I'll have someone speak the first line. I show them with my hand the relative pitch they're speaking on, because we're not going, I'll have someone read the first line. No, I'll have someone read the first line.
So basically, our language is already some kind of music.
Well, when we're speaking, we're singing to each other,
Yeah.
because we speak on pitch and we speak in rhythm.
Mm.
But melody is just expanded speech. When we speak in this range. When we sing, we expand it. We might hold out a note longer to give it emphasis. Where we put it on, in the measure gives it also different emphasis. We're turning the spotlight on different places. So I'll say, okay, well, you know the pitch and the rhythm, your inflection. It's just see, in popular music, it is the natural pitch and rhythm of speech that informs melody. It should sound conversational. It's not like 20th century opera. It's not like 20th century opera. It's not like 20th century opera. And so I say, who loves to sing? Who can sing that? Because you know what it sounds like, and so someone will sing it, and then I'll play it for them in 3 or 4 different styles on the guitar. Like I might play it for them as a blues, as a pop song, as a folk song, as jazz, or whatever seems to suggest, and say, well, which one of those most evokes what you're trying to say with the lyric? Which one feels like what the lyric's saying? And they'll choose one of those, and then we'll go through. So the kids come up with the melody, and I come up with harmonic structure, because a third grader can't say play a minor 7 flat 5 chord. They don't have that vocabulary, nor do usually that ability. And so at the end of the first day, we usually have one section of lyric written with and the music for it. And then the second day, we write the contrasting sections. If we've started with a verse, we'll write a chorus and often a bridge. But in the same kind of process, in that they're coming up with the melody for it. And we have a finished song at the end of the second day, which we record in the classroom. And then we also do a good guitar vocal or piano vocal version of it, so that all the songs exist as something people would want to listen to. We're not doing full band arrangements. Maybe I'm playing guitar and someone else is singing, or we're doing, but it's a good guitar vocal version of it, so that later on people can hear it and they like it, take it further. When we were in person before COVID, we would usually go into a school for 5 days. We'd write we'd write 8 songs during the week. We'd start 4 on Monday, finish them Tuesday, start 4 more Wednesday, finish them Thursday. We'd rehearse with the kids Friday morning. Friday afternoon, we'd have a concert for the school. And then Friday evening, we'd have a concert for the whole community, because I look at Kid Pan Alley as a community building project also. And that would be our week, and I'd be exhausted. Completely drained, and the kids would be, it was great though. I loved doing that with the kids. During COVID, we did it all virtually, and it worked really well. It worked every bit as well for the writing. In fact, in some ways, a little better, because each of the children was on their own device. So there was less, poking the person next to them, and more focus here. The other part of it is it made things go faster, because when you're talking to one child, others can be putting things in the chat.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so it rolled faster. The concert suffered a little bit, because instead of the kids being up on stage singing with us, they could sing, but they had to be muted. Otherwise, we'd be out of time with each other. So, I didn't like the concerts quite as well, but they still worked fine. But we would do them from here. Now we're kind of doing some hybrid ones where we write virtually and then do a tour of doing the concerts, and that's the best of both worlds. Certainly, doing the workshops virtually saves a lot of wear and tear on my old body, but also saves a lot of money also, without having to fly, all around the country all the time. So it's worked out well, although places I want to go, we still do, like, we do Hawaii every year, and Colorado and things like that. But a lot of them we're doing virtually.
Wow. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I would love to know if the process you lead the kids through, is it the same as you lead adults?
With adult, so the process with the children is for them to experience the creative process.
Okay.
Not for me to teach them, like, be a talking head and teach them. So it's very much a back and forth creative process.
A bit of a different intention.
Whereas when I'm working with adults, I may explain things more.
Okay.
There'll be more explanation involved. With the kids, what I do, I don't say, okay, now kids, I'm going to teach you about alliteration. And, here's what alliteration is, and here's alliteration creates rhythm. Well, similar sounds create rhythm, and etc. But if someone came up with something that was alliterative, I'll say, man, that's great, Billy, that, you used alliteration there. Here's what it does. And you hear, and I might take the phrase they said and take the alliteration out of it, and you hear how much more rhythm it had because of the alliteration. So that's the biggest difference. But when I'm teaching adults, it's I try and make it very interactive also. I don't like being a talking head there and lecturing. I've never been into lecturing. I want them to experience the process, and so I'll have them do all kinds of exercises and things like that along the way.
And what have you witnessed with the kids going through that experience? What do they take from that? How's the feedback? What do you see them? How that affects their life or their understanding of themselves positively?
Yeah, well, I think it happens different for different children. Some of them, just are so excited that they created. All of them are excited that they created something. I mean, I see it. You'll start off and you'll be in a classroom, and you'll have, a handful of kids who are really participating, and another handful of kids who, are sitting back and not engaged, because
Mhm.
that's how they're used to being in school,
Mhm.
present but not engaged.
Mhm.
And so my job is getting everybody engaged. And so, I go up and get in their face and ask them questions and try and lead them into engagement. And I find that through the course of the workshop, they become engaged and interested in what's going on. Uh, in general, it's the most fun they've ever had in school. Uh, and in general, I think one of the things that is really important about it is we're really listening to what they have to say.
Mhm.
And we're creating a safe space for them to say it in. We would, I don't let, I say every idea is a good idea.
Mhm.
Because if uh, uh, Georgie said something that
Mhm.
reminded Sam of something, that reminded Tyrone of something, and that was the perfect thing for the song, we might never have gotten to what Tyrone said
Mhm.
unless Georgie had said this thing that was kind of silly in the beginning. So, every idea is a good idea. Every idea is encouraged. Say what comes to your mind. The editing process is different than the creative process. In the editing, we can argue over the word. In the creating, we're trying to get our thoughts out. We're trying to get our ideas out and say exactly what we mean.
To kind of suspend our editing function, no? Express
Yeah,
truthfully what's coming through us.
yeah. Yeah, it is suspending the editing function, which is in a way how I learned to be a good songwriter. Um, I had been involved in this Augusta workshop in Elkins, West Virginia for many years. I helped start it, and uh, and back in the early years, I was teaching instrument making there, and a friend of mine, Cy Khan, was teaching songwriting there. And Cy said to me, "Why don't you write songs as much anymore, Paul?" And I said, "Oh, well, Lorraine's the best songwriter in the band, and I'm so busy managing the band and da 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 and doing all this." And he said, "I tell you what, get up tomorrow morning and write a song before you come in to teach, and I'll buy you a beer uh, tomorrow night." And I thought, okay. So I got up, a half hour early and I wrote a song. And he didn't say write a long song, write a good song. He just said write a song and finish it. And I did. Got my beer. Next day I did the same thing. All week I did it. And one of the things he said is take these songs, put them in a file folder, and don't look at them for 6 months. Just write them. And so, the week was up, Cy left, and I found that I was enjoying it so much I kept writing. And most days I would write a song first thing in the morning and I'd put it in the file folder. And that would be it. And 6 months came and I had a lot of songs. I didn't have one every day, but I probably, had 4 or 5 a week. And I found I didn't want to look at them. I was afraid if I looked at them and they really sucked, I would stop. And so I kept writing and it did this for almost 3 years. Uh, I don't even know how many songs I had at the end of that. It was probably 400 or 500 in there, I think. And when I looked at them, it was as if someone else had written those songs. Most of them I didn't remember writing. Uh, and it was as if somebody else had done it. Um, and then I could look at them dispassionately and go, oh, well, this one's good. This one's terrible. This one needs a little work. I could edit them. I could, make them better. And what I found is that I loved the process of writing. And I think that most songwriters love the process of having written. Uh, they find writing to be really challenging, but they love to have written and to have a hit song as their middle name. And I was kind of the opposite in that I loved to write, and I didn't really care if Garth cut my song or not. Uh, I loved the process of writing. And I think that really served me well for Kid Pan Alley because it allowed me to turn it on uh, as if flipping a switch.
Um, yeah, and that's also something I wanted to ask you in our conversation, no? Because you have this incredible output and quantity in work, and from what I know, you have more than 3,000, or you created more than 3,500 compositions, and with what you're sharing right now with us, and from what I'm understanding, really to create and suspend your editing function, would you say this is a key element in being able to produce or create so much work? Or what would you say? What was the key, or what is the key to be able to create such an amount of work?
Well, I think part of it is that way of working where the writing and the editing are separate. Most people sit there and they'll write a first line for their song, and then they'll scratch their heads for the next hour and a half thinking of the second line and what will rhyme with the end of the first line. And then they get the second line and they spend another half hour on the next line, and they go through it that way. And creativity is a flow. It's the river flowing by you. And so I like the idea more of writing and then going back and worrying about those pesky little details. Adults are funny. When you're writing with adults, it takes longer to write with adults than with kids because adults worry about the punctuation. And I'm going, it's a song. It doesn't matter if that's a comma. But and those kinds of things. So I think that one of the things that's really helped me is I get the bones of the song out there pretty quickly. And then I go back and I edit. And we work through it that way. And I have a fair amount of skill in writing. I feel like I'm equal in lyric writing and song and the music writing part of it. But I don't have the level of skill like someone like Robert Fritz does, who it's astounding to me to watch like Robert compose music and how incredibly fast he is at it. And it's because he has all the chops. And, I have the songwriting chops when I try and write something like an orchestra piece. It's slow going for me because I don't have that same skill set. Robert's just so fast at everything he does because of the way in which he, looks at it and the creative tension that is created in seeing where you are right now and where you're going. And he's a genius and master of moving through that and getting it done.
And when you're saying two parts of the process, the creative process, and what I'm understanding is kind of suspending this conceptual, rational understanding, but then in the editing part, there you can very, very much make use of your conceptual understanding to fine-tune it and polish it. Is that a correct interpretation? And also because you said that before, there's bad songs and there's great songs. What would you say is what makes a great song?
Well, that's a hard question. But to me, what makes a great song is something that moves somebody in some way. So in other words, it connects. Now, there are good songs that have some flaws, and sometimes the flaws take away from the emotional feeling of the song. That is, like, let's say you record a song and the singer's out of tune. Well, the listener isn't going to experience the same depth of the song because there's this thing scratching at this itch on their neck about there, and it's going to take them out of really listening to the song. They're going to go, oh, I feel a little discomfort in my body because, this is out of tune. Well, it's the same with, you have things that aren't quite working. They're mostly working. And so you have a good song, but a great one. One of the things about it is having done it so much, I don't have to think about it. It happens naturally. That is, even in the process of writing the song, I'm still editing, but it's just because I know the language so well. Like a beginner, when you're learning to speak, you're thinking one word at a time.
Mm.
When you're learning a language, you're learning, arrivederci, and then, you go from there. When you become fluent in the language, you have an image and you're just describing the image. Well, having written that many songs, I'm really fluent in the language of songwriting, and so it kind of happens naturally. And I don't have as much editing to do as I used to, way back then. And I do a lot of editing in the process with the kids, because with the kids, they may say something really interesting, but it's not quite poetic enough, or it's not quite this. And I can take, like, I've done it so much that I can maybe take what they said and rearrange the words a little bit and leave out a word or two, and all of a sudden it becomes, very, very, very creative. In a way, it reminds me of when I was a kid. There was a television show, the Dobie Gillis Show. It's long before your time, but there was Dobie Gillis was this kind of suburban kid who had a friend, Maynard G. Krebs, who was a hippie, an early hippie. I guess you'd call him a beatnik. It was so long ago. And one time Maynard stuck his finger in an electrical socket, and it rearranged his brain so he could take whatever's said and turn it into a hit song immediately. And that's kind of how I feel my life is. Stuck my finger in the songwriting socket, and someone says something, and it somehow gets a little rearranged and becomes poetic. It's like Leonard Bernstein said, "It's ambiguity that turns prose into poetry." And yes, we make it more poetic by making it a little bit ambiguous. It could, variety of possible meaning. And I love that kind of image of it, but that is it. Someone says something in ordinary language, but you can turn it into poetry with a little bit of deletion or a little bit of rearranging, how it goes.
One of the things which, on the one hand, you hear often even from writing teachers, that sooner or later you will feel, you will face resistance, or resistance as part of the creative process. And this term I've not heard with Robert Fritz, but very often from other sources, it's mentioned as part, and you have to face your resistance and to overcome your resistance. And what would you say about those perspectives?
Well, so I think the concept of writer's block is kind of a false concept. Writer's block is you come up against some resistance, and you keep hitting your head in the same place on the wall, trying to break through the wall. And what I like to do is have enough different ways of working that you go around the wall. So, for example, I in all my adult songwriting camps, I teach a workshop called directed writing, and so usually it's 4 days of 2 or 3 hours a day. And what I'm giving them in there, they're writing a song during the process of it. They're writing a song in a very specific kind of way. I partner them with someone, and you tell your partner a story about a person, place, or a thing that changed you in some way, from how you were before to how you were after. And you listen very intently to the person's story, and you write their song, not your own song, so that you're free to change the details to make them more powerful. You're not stuck. So their story is your inspiration, but it's not, it's not just the facts, ma'am, kind of thing. And I find that works really well. And I have them write in so many different ways. I'll have them write their story as a fairy tale. I'll have them write it as a verse refrain song where, every other line might be the same line. I'll have them do all the things we've talked about already here with it, so that they have so many ways of working. If they get stuck, they just go to a different way. And really the whole part of it is they don't write the song until the very end. all of what they're doing in there is they're writing a bunch of things, and they're circling the things that have power for them and putting those aside. And when they then sit down to write their song, it happens very quickly because all of the things are there. The story's there because they wrote it as a fairy tale, which, is a great example of dramatic structure, as Aristotle had set out. They've written it as a refrain line, verse refrain song, so that they have a kind of basic idea of what might be, the most important line. I've had them, I've had them create metaphors in their song. I've had them create a list of rhymes for words that they think are going to be important. So when they sit down to actually write the song, it's all there in front of them, and they're just assembling it. And because they have so many tools at their disposal from that, they never get stuck again. I mean, I don't get stuck. I just kind of keep plowing through, and it's because, well, if it's not happening here, maybe I'll play this in a different way or do this differently. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to tell you about when I was writing songs every day, I had to fool myself. You see, if you start the same way every day, you're going to write the same song. Or as they said of Vivaldi, he didn't write whatever it was 300 concertos. He wrote one concerto 300 times. And if you start like a lot of folk singers do, they'll pick up their guitar and they'll play a few chords and start writing. If you're writing that many songs, you're going to start writing the same thing over and over again. So I would do things like I'd put my guitar in some oddball tuning that I had no idea where the notes were, so I had to listen and find them. Hear what was going on in my head and find it, as opposed to letting my muscles write the song. I had to first pre-hear it in my head. I might take my guitar and play it upside down, or I might play my hammer dulcimer upside down, or I might play an instrument I barely knew how to play, or I might just take a walk and sing it, and write it. And just to start, and sometimes I would start with like a drum loop, and sometimes I might start with a chord progression, and sometimes I would just do something random. But that helped me find a way through so many of the different blockages that you have. And I think people have blockages because or they don't have the skill set to carry it through. Everybody has ideas. What separates a creative songwriter from someone who's written a couple of songs is we finish our songs. Instead of just get the idea in the first verse down and then we have no idea where to go from there.
And when you shared that example of having someone else's story as an inspiration, and you also described the story as it changed you, or it changed the person, the story they were invited to share. Is music ultimately about transformation?
I wouldn't, yes and no. I mean, music, we want our songs to be transformative. If someone's feeling bad, we want the song to make them feel better, or the song to go deeper, help them go deeper into the emotion they're feeling. Music is a system of tension and release. We create tension, and the tension leads us to the release of that tension. So dissonance to consonance, tension to relaxation. So it does that, on a grander scale, on a big scale, but also on a very small scale, measure to measure, beat to beat. An accented beat on the first beat of the measure, an accented on the second, little accent on the third, and no unaccented on the fourth. So we create the tensions on a miniature scale, and then the overall piece has movement in places where we've come to the climax. So music is telling a story. It's an art form that tells a story. If it's, if it's just purely instrumental music, it tells a story in a metaphorical language. In essence, music is a metaphor, because, how do we describe a chair in music? If I say the word chair, you got a picture of it.
Mm.
So we are creating a story, and in essence, if we want that story, it needs to go somewhere. It's not a still life. Music is a temporal thing; it happens in time, and so I think we want something that's moving, that creates dramatic tension along the way that leads it along. Otherwise, it just kind of sits there, and and there is music that just kind of sits there. I mean, I think some new age music was like that. It was very relaxing, but it lacked the tension that moved it from here to here, just like Robert talks about the structural tension. So he has where it wants to go, where it is now, the tension between that pulling it along. Well, let's say, okay, here's how it is now, and I'm just going to keep doing what's here now. There's no tension leading the story forward, so it just kind of sits there like a still life. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. Paul, this is an incredibly interesting and insightful conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing from your
delightful talking with you.
Experience and work, and opening our eyes for the creative process from another perspective. Is there something you think is important to still share, or another share close to your heart, which you want to address to our audience, or something else you think is important? Please feel free.
Sure. Well, I think at this stage of my life, and actually for quite a while, my real calling, I think, is helping other people find their creative voice, whether it's children or adults. And so I do some songwriting teaching for adults. I used to spend my whole summers doing that in different camps around the country. Now, because Kid Pan Alley has been so just keeps me busy all the time, that I cut back on that. And I'm getting into doing it more again now, where, I have one that I've done every year in Colorado for the last 30 years, Rocky Mountain Song School.
Can I just ask you, is this for people or adults who are already writing songs, or is this also for amateurs who have never written any song? For both.
It's for both. And that's a big workshop. We have 185 students. There's a bunch of teachers. I sort of was the core teacher in the beginning, and I've helped put it all together over these last 30 years. But we have people who are beginners, and we have people who are professional touring songwriters in there. And one of the most interesting things is it's often the beginners who have the big breakthrough that inspires the professionals. Because as professionals, we sort of think we know most of it. And the beginner's like, oh, wow. And so I love having both there. And, I'll teach some classes where they're prerequisites, like an advanced harmony class. You have to have some pretty good theoretical knowledge to get to really get what we're talking about in an advanced harmony class. But I love having both. And then we're doing one in October in Italy. We're starting a similar program to what we have in Colorado, but doing it in such Colorado's beautiful, and Italy is astounding, and the food is astounding at this place we're doing it in Italy. So people can find out about that by going to songcampitaly.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the Colorado one is bluegrass.com/songschool.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure the Colorado one usually is been filled up for a couple of months. There may be some cancellations, but I know we still have a few places left in the Italy one. And this is our first year doing the Italy one, but it'll be a yearly thing. So I love doing that, but I also love the idea of finding how the music connects different groups of people together. So we have a lot of projects because, we can write a song about anything. And in fact, we probably, with that many songs, we probably have written about most everything. And so we do a lot of partnerships. Like we have a program that we do with orchestras where we write songs with the kids and then we bring in a quartet, an oddball quartet from the orchestra, like a string, a wind, a brass, and a percussioner. And we'll show the kids how we might go about arranging the song with the different instruments. And then we pick a few of the songs and we do full orchestral arrangements of them. And the orchestra performs them. And the kids get to come up and sing their song with, a 60-piece orchestra. And it's pretty amazing if you're a third grader and, you got to do something like that. Then we have a program called the Music of Art that we developed with the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which is a really world-class museum, where we use work in the museum as inspiration for their artwork. So they'll come in and we'll pick out a piece. They'll pick out a piece they want to write about, and we'll write about that piece. And then after they've written their song, the museum will send an art educator in, and they will create their own artwork inspired by the song they wrote. So it's art inspiring song, then song inspiring art. We have projects we've done with national parks where we take the kids up to the park, the rangers, tour them around, they learn about the flora and the environment. We write songs about that. We found that it's really interesting when you work with another organization that may have different goals, and what's the common ground? How can the songwriting move, help in what the other organization's trying to accomplish? And we have programs we do. We have a program called Everybody Has Something to Say, which is a program we do for very seriously impacted children with autism. In fact, a lot of the children don't have language. And so we write songs with them using little pictograms, and we work with, what we'll do is we'll partner them with normally developing children, and then we'll work with their peers, and how do you interpret how do you know what they're trying to say by how they squeeze your hand, or how they smile, or how they look at you, or whatever. And so it'll get them to be listening on a deeper level. And we'll write songs and we'll have pictures and, say, okay, here's 3. Children might go, point, or some of them have communication devices, and we work through it that way. So there's so many different ways of working with it. And I'm always interested in finding, because I learn from each one of them. I learn a lot from each one of them.
And then we're back to the learning orientation.
Yes, I'm a learner as opposed to a performer. I think Robert, I don't know if that came from Robert or not, but I seem to remember once he said something like learners and performers. And performers are people who do something and they have some success with it and they keep doing the same thing over and over again for the rest of their career. And a learner is someone who does something, and once they know how to do it, they do something different. I'm a learner, so I didn't know how. I studied composition and theory in college, but I was a terrible student, and I had no idea what I was doing. So when I wrote, co-wrote this Aesop's Fables thing, I had an awful lot of things I had to learn in order to be able to do it. And I learned so much in the process of writing a half an hour of music for orchestra. Same with the musicals. I had done a lot of music for theater. My late wife was an Obie Award-winning playwright, actress, and director, and I did music for her plays for 20 years. And after she passed, I was missing the theater, and I thought, well, I'm a pretty good. I've lived with a world-class playwright for 30 some years, and I've been writing music my whole life. Well, those are the things you need to write a musical. So I, sat down and started writing musicals, and really, really enjoyed that because it combined my experience writing script and being around script, and my musical ability. But it also allowed me to create long form. Because see, a song's really short, and it's pretty easy to hold people's interest for 3 minutes. It's a lot harder to hold their interest for an hour and a half. And so you learn a lot in trying to create an arc to a story so that there's interest throughout the whole thing.
Dear Paul, thank you so much. And also the songwriting seminars you're offering and the web pages you just mentioned for everybody who's listening to that, will be down there in the description. So, and also your website and the website to Pan Alley.
I have my own, and I have my own website too, although I admit that I don't keep it up. So the Kid Pan Alley one is the best one, kidpanalley.org.
Yeah, perfect. I will put it also down in the description so that everybody who is interested and curious to explore that and learn more about what you do is very much invited to do so.
Delightful talking with you, Simon. If you have any other questions about it, like if you hear some of the songs and you want me to create a little introduction for something you might want to play, it's easy to do. I have a story for every song, pretty much, if I can remember it.
Yeah, likewise, Paul. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And I have the feeling we're just scratching the surface here, but it was a really, really valuable and very appreciated insight into your experience and your approach to the creative process. So thank you so much.
And good luck with all you're doing, and you're a lucky man getting to work with Robert. I love Robert. He's just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been incredibly insightful and very helpful to reorientate to my own ideas in a sense, and also provide a framework or a set of tools to really start bringing into life what is important to myself. Yeah, and yeah, that's it. Thank you everybody also for being with us, for watching this, for listening, and being open, curious-minded, and my best wishes to you, and see you soon. Yeah, take care.